The Middle East is currently witnessing the most significant military confrontation of the 21st century, a conflict that has rapidly evolved from a series of targeted strikes into a full-scale regional war that threatens to dismantle the existing global order. We are now entering the 17th day of what the United States and Israel have officially designated as Operation Epic Fury, and the situation on the ground, at sea, and in the corridors of power is more volatile than ever before. This is not just a battle for regional influence, it is a fundamental struggle for survival and dominance that has drawn in every major power and is currently being felt in the pockets of every consumer worldwide. From the burning oil facilities in the Persian Gulf to the high-stakes diplomatic maneuvering in Washington and Tehran, the world is holding its breath as the future of the Middle East hangs in the balance. Welcome to WarCase, your definitive source for in-depth military analysis and real-time updates from the front lines of global conflict. Today, we are bringing you a comprehensive breakdown of the current state of the US-Iran war, with a specific focus on the catastrophic closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the latest military developments that are reshaping the map of the Middle East. Before we dive into the heart of this unfolding crisis, make sure to subscribe to WarCase and hit that notification bell. We are tracking this conflict hour by hour, and you won't want to miss our upcoming deep dives into the secret weapons and tactical shifts that are defining this new era of warfare. Leave a like on this video if you want us to continue providing this level of detailed analysis, and share this broadcast with anyone who needs to understand the true gravity of what is happening right now. Your engagement is what allows us to keep the WarCase mission alive. Now let's look at the current status of the most vital maritime choke point on the planet. As of March 16, 2026, the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed to all shipping associated with the United States and its coalition partners. This closure, which began as a desperate retaliatory measure by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on March 2nd, has now entered its third week, and the impact on global trade is nothing short of apocalyptic. More than 1,000 cargo ships, the vast majority of them massive oil and gas tankers, are currently blocked from transiting this narrow waterway. The Strait of Hormuz is the jugular vein of the global energy market, with approximately 20% of the world's daily oil production and a significant portion of its liquefied natural gas passing through its waters. With this vein now constricted, the global economy is facing a crisis that dwarfs the oil shocks of the 1970s. The price of Brent crude has surged past $85 a barrel, and analysts warn that if the closure persists, we could see triple-digit oil prices within weeks. In the United States, the average price of gasoline has seen its most dramatic increase in decades, a direct and painful consequence of the IRGC's blockade. But the crisis isn't just about oil. Qatar Energy, the world's leading producer of LNG, has been forced to halt nearly all production destined for Western markets because it simply cannot get its tankers through the strait. This has left Europe and parts of Asia facing an immediate and severe energy shortage, forcing governments to consider drastic rationing measures as the conflict shows no signs of abating. The Iranian regime, despite the devastating loss of its supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, on the third day of the war, has maintained a defiant stance. The three-person leadership council currently governing the country, consisting of President Masoud Pezeshkian, the hardline judiciary head Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei, and the influential cleric Alireza Arafi, has repeatedly stated that the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until all U.S. and Israeli forces are withdrawn from the region, and the sanctions that have crippled the Iranian economy for years are completely lifted. This is a high-stakes game of economic brinkmanship, and the Iranian leadership appears willing to inflict maximum pain on the world, even as their own country is being systematically dismantled by coalition airstrikes. However, the blockade is not absolute for everyone. In a fascinating and potentially game-changing development, reports have emerged that China is in direct, high-level negotiations with Tehran to secure safe passage for its own tankers and for Qatari LNG vessels destined for Chinese ports. This highlights the complex geopolitical reality of this war. While the US and its allies are being choked off, other powers are seeking to exploit the chaos to their own advantage. If China succeeds in securing a separate peace in the Strait of Hormuz, it would not only undermine the US-led coalition's objectives, but also significantly shift the global balance of power in favor of Beijing. Meanwhile, the Iranian Ghost Fleet, a network of aging tankers used for years to bypass sanctions, continues to operate with surprising resilience. These vessels are reportedly loading Iranian crude at various points along the coast and attempting to make the run eastward, often under the cover of darkness and using sophisticated electronic warfare to mask their movements. This ongoing export of oil, even at a reduced capacity, provides the Iranian regime with a vital financial lifeline that is allowing them to sustain their resistance despite the overwhelming military pressure they are facing. The U.S. Navy, for its part, is facing one of its greatest challenges in history. The Pentagon has been weighing options for what is being called Operation Epic Escort, a massive naval operation intended to break the Iranian blockade and provide armed escorts for commercial shipping through the strait. However, the risks are immense. The IRGC has spent decades preparing for this exact scenario, saturating the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz with thousands of advanced sea mines, fast attack craft, and coastal anti-ship missile batteries. The U.S. Navy has reportedly informed the shipping industry that full-scale escorts are currently not possible because the threat level is simply too high. A single successful strike on a massive oil tanker could not only cause a catastrophic environmental disaster, but also lead to a level of escalation that neither side may be able to control. The missing Navy of the United States, a fleet that has been stretched thin by commitments in the Pacific and the Atlantic, is now finding itself in a desperate race against time to assemble the necessary assets to challenge the Iranian blockade. Every day the strait remains closed. The pressure on the coalition to take even more drastic action increases, bringing us closer to a potential global conflagration. This is the reality of the war in the Strait of Hormuz, a brutal and high-stakes struggle that is being fought not just with missiles and torpedoes, but with the very lifeblood of the global economy. As we continue this WarCase special report, we want to hear from you. How is the rising cost of energy affecting your daily life? Are you seeing the impact at the gas pump or in your utility bills? Leave a comment below and let us know your perspective. Your feedback is essential for us to understand the true human cost of this conflict. And if you find this analysis valuable, please make sure to share this video on your social media. The more people who understand the complexities of this war, the better prepared we all will be for what comes next. Now let's shift our focus to the air and ground war, where Operation Epic Fury is entering a new and even more intense phase. On the 17th day of the conflict, U.S. Central Command has reported that while the initial waves of airstrikes have been highly successful, the Iranian military and its proxy network remain a potent and dangerous threat. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth recently declared that Iranian drone capabilities have been degraded by as much as 95%, a testament to the effectiveness of the coalition's targeted strikes on manufacturing facilities and launch sites. However, this does not mean the threat has been eliminated. Iran is reportedly now utilizing Russian-produced and possibly modified Shahed drones, which are being launched in smaller, more decentralized waves to evade coalition air defenses. These suicide drones have been used to target U.S. bases and diplomatic compounds across the region, as well as civilian targets in neighboring Gulf countries. In a particularly concerning development, a missile recently struck a civilian vehicle in Abu Dhabi, and a major fire was reported near the Dubai International Airport after a drone attack. While the fire was contained and flights were only temporarily suspended, these incidents highlight the terrifying reality that no one in the region is truly safe from the spillover of this war. In Iraq, the situation is equally precarious. Iran-allied militias have launched multiple strikes on U.S. targets in Baghdad, including 2 major attacks in the last 48 hours alone. These militias, which operate with a high degree of autonomy but are heavily influenced by Tehran, are seeking to force a U.S. withdrawal from Iraq and to open a second front in the war. The U.S. military has responded with its own retaliatory strikes, but this only risks drawing Iraq further into the conflict, a scenario that would have devastating consequences for the country's already fragile stability. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Israel has dramatically expanded its offensive against Hezbollah. What began as a series of targeted airstrikes has now evolved into a major ground and air campaign aimed at pushing Hezbollah forces back from the Israeli border and destroying their vast arsenal of missiles and rockets. The Israeli military has issued urgent evacuation orders for dozens of towns and villages in southern Lebanon, and the resulting humanitarian crisis is staggering. Thousands of civilians are being forced to flee their homes, and the infrastructure of the country is being systematically destroyed. Hezbollah, for its part, has retaliated with its own missile barrages into northern and central Israel, demonstrating that despite the intense pressure, it remains a formidable military force. The war in Lebanon is now a central pillar of the wider conflict, and its outcome will have a profound impact on the future of the entire region. Back in Iran, the regime continues to reel from the death of its supreme leader and the destruction of much of its military infrastructure. However, the three-person leadership council has shown no signs of surrender. Despite President Trump's recent claims that Iran wants to negotiate, the Iranian leadership has so far refused to engage in any meaningful discussions. Mediation efforts by Oman and Egypt have so far failed to produce a ceasefire, as both sides remain entrenched in their positions. The U.S. is demanding a total dismantling of Iran's nuclear and missile programs and an end to its support for proxy groups, while the Iranian regime is fighting for its very survival. The power vacuum created by Khamenei's death has also led to reports of internal power struggles and civil unrest in some parts of the country. While some Iranians may see the war as an opportunity to overthrow a repressive regime, many others are being driven by a sense of nationalistic outrage against what they see as a foreign invasion. The potential for a total collapse of the Iranian state into a state of civil war is a very real and terrifying possibility, one that would create a level of chaos that would be impossible to contain. This is the state of the US-Iran war on day 17, a regional conflagration that is spreading like wildfire, an economic crisis that is threatening to consume the global economy, and a humanitarian disaster that is affecting millions of innocent people. Operation Epic Fury has achieved many of its initial military objectives, but the war is far from over, and the path to peace has never seemed more uncertain. The tactical evolution of the naval war in the Persian Gulf is one of the most critical aspects of the current conflict, a high-stakes chess game played out on the water and beneath the waves. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, or IRGCN, has spent decades preparing for this exact scenario, a direct confrontation with a superior naval force in the narrow and congested waters of the Strait of Hormuz. Their strategy is one of asymmetric warfare, utilizing a combination of thousands of fast attack craft, midget submarines, and coastal anti-ship missile batteries to create a lethal environment for any coalition vessel. These fast attack craft, often armed with heavy machine guns, rocket launchers, and even short-range anti-ship missiles, operate in swarms, attempting to overwhelm the defenses of much larger and more sophisticated warships. They use their speed and maneuverability to close in on their targets, often under the cover of darkness or in the chaotic maritime environment of the Gulf, where hundreds of commercial vessels are often present. The U.S. Navy and its coalition partners have responded with their own advanced defenses, including phalanx close-in weapon systems, CRAM missiles, and sophisticated electronic warfare suites designed to jam the guidance systems of incoming missiles and drones. However, the sheer volume of the Iranian swarm attacks remains a significant challenge. Every day, coalition warships are forced to expend valuable and expensive munitions to intercept relatively low-cost Iranian threats, a dynamic that the IRGC is actively seeking to exploit to drain the coalition's resources and resolve. The use of sea mines is another critical component of the Iranian naval strategy. The IRGC has a vast and diverse arsenal of mines, ranging from simple contact mines to more sophisticated influence mines that can be triggered by the magnetic, acoustic, or pressure signatures of a passing vessel. These mines have been laid throughout the Strait of Hormuz and its approaches, creating a lethal obstacle course for any ship attempting to transit the area. The U.S. Navy's mine countermeasures capabilities, while advanced, are being stretched to their limits by the sheer scale of the Iranian mining operation. Every day, specialized mine-hunting vessels and helicopters are working to clear safe channels, but the IRGC is reportedly continuing to lay new mines under the cover of night, using a variety of small and inconspicuous vessels. This ongoing mine war is one of the primary reasons why the U.S. Navy has so far been unable to provide full-scale escorts for commercial shipping. The risk of a single mine strike on a massive oil tanker is simply too high, as it could lead to a catastrophic environmental disaster and a level of escalation that neither side may be able to control. The drone war is another area where we are seeing a rapid and terrifying evolution in tactics and technology. While U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has declared that Iranian drone capabilities have been significantly degraded. The IRGC has demonstrated a surprising ability to adapt and continue its attacks. The use of Russian-produced Shahed drones, which have been modified by Iranian engineers to improve their range, accuracy, and payload, is a clear indication of the ongoing military cooperation between Tehran and Moscow. These drones are often launched in small, decentralized waves, making them difficult for coalition air defenses to detect and intercept. They are being used to target a wide array of targets, from U.S. military bases and diplomatic compounds to civilian infrastructure in neighboring Gulf countries. In a particularly concerning development, reports have emerged that the IRGC is now utilizing swarm intelligence in its drone attacks, allowing multiple drones to coordinate their movements and target a single objective from different directions simultaneously. This represents a significant leap in Iranian drone technology and a major challenge for coalition air defenses. The U.S. and its partners are responding with their own advanced anti-drone systems, including high-energy lasers, microwave weapons, and electronic jamming systems. However, the drone war remains a constant and evolving threat, one that is forcing coalition forces to remain in a state of high alert at all times. The regional proxy war is also entering a new and even more dangerous phase. In Iraq, the various Shiite militias that are allied with Iran have significantly increased their attacks on U.S. targets, seeking to force a U.S. withdrawal and to open a second front in the war. These militias, which are often heavily armed with Iranian-supplied rockets, drones, and even short-range ballistic missiles, operate with a high degree of autonomy, but are clearly being influenced and supported by Tehran. The U.S. military has responded with its own retaliatory strikes, but this only risks drawing Iraq further into the conflict, a scenario that would have devastating consequences for the country's already fragile stability. In Yemen, the Houthi rebels, who have been fighting a long-running war against a Saudi-led coalition, have also increased their attacks on Saudi and Emirati targets, as well as on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. These attacks are a clear demonstration of the Houthis' loyalty to Iran and their willingness to support Tehran in its confrontation with the U.S. and Israel. The war in Lebanon is perhaps the most intense and destructive of the regional proxy conflicts. Israel's expanded offensive against Hezbollah has led to widespread devastation and a staggering humanitarian crisis. Hezbollah, despite the intense pressure it is facing, remains a formidable military force, with a vast arsenal of missiles and rockets that it is continuing to launch into northern and central Israel. The conflict in Lebanon is now a central pillar of the wider war, and its outcome will have a profound impact on the future of the entire region. The diplomatic front is also characterized by a high degree of tension and uncertainty. While Oman and Egypt have been attempting to mediate a ceasefire, both the U.S. and the Iranian regime have so far shown little willingness to back down. President Trump has maintained a policy of maximum pressure, demanding a total dismantling of Iran's nuclear and missile programs and an end to its support for proxy groups. The Iranian leadership, for its part, is fighting for its very survival and has repeatedly stated that it will not negotiate under duress. The power vacuum created by the death of Ayatollah Khamenei has also made the diplomatic situation even more complex, as it is unclear who within the Iranian leadership has the authority to negotiate a peace deal. The potential for a total collapse of the Iranian state into a state of civil war is a very real and terrifying possibility, one that would create a level of chaos that would be impossible to contain. This is the reality of the US-Iran war on day 17, a regional conflagration that is spreading like wildfire, an economic crisis that is threatening to consume the global economy, and a humanitarian disaster that is affecting millions of innocent people. Operation Epic Fury has achieved many of its initial military objectives, but the war is far from over, and the path to peace has never seemed more uncertain. The historical context of the Strait of Hormuz as a strategic choke point is essential to understanding why its closure is such a catastrophic event. For centuries, this narrow waterway has been a vital artery for global trade, connecting the oil-rich regions of the Persian Gulf with the rest of the world. Its importance only grew in the 20th century, as the world became increasingly dependent on oil and gas. The first major crisis in the strait occurred during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, when both sides targeted each other's tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. The US eventually intervened to protect commercial shipping, a move that led to a direct military confrontation with Iran. Since then, the strait has remained a constant point of tension, with Iran repeatedly threatening to close it whenever it felt threatened by the US or its allies. The current closure, however, is far more significant and potentially devastating than anything seen in the past. The global economy is now far more interconnected and dependent on the energy supplies that pass through the strait, and the level of military technology on both sides is far more advanced. The IRGC's ability to close the strait and to defend its blockade is a testament to the decades of preparation and investment they have made in their asymmetric naval capabilities. The U.S. Navy's challenge in reopening the strait is equally significant, as it must overcome a lethal and multi-layered defense system while minimizing the risk of a catastrophic escalation. The economic impact of the closure is already being felt in every corner of the world. In addition to the spike in oil and gas prices, the disruption to global supply chains is causing widespread shortages of essential goods and services. The shipping industry is facing a crisis of unprecedented proportions, with hundreds of vessels stranded and insurance rates skyrocketing. The global financial markets are also in a state of turmoil, as investors grapple with the uncertainty and the potential for a prolonged global recession. The human cost of the closure is also mounting, as millions of people around the world are affected by the rising cost of energy and the disruption to their daily lives. In the Middle East, the situation is even more dire, as the closure of the strait is exacerbating existing humanitarian crises and fueling regional instability. The potential for the conflict to spread beyond the region is a very real and terrifying possibility, as other powers may be drawn in to protect their own interests. The world is facing a moment of profound crisis, and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is at the very center of it. The path to a peaceful resolution is shrouded in uncertainty, and the consequences of failure are too terrible to contemplate. As we continue our coverage of this world-shattering event, we want to remind you that your support is more important than ever. Please subscribe to WarCase, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments section below. Together, we can ensure that the truth about what is happening in the Middle East is told. Thank you for being part of the WarCase community. The role of international law in the current conflict is another critical theme that warrants careful examination. The U.S.-Israeli operation, launched without a clear mandate from the UN Security Council and justified as a preemptive strike, has raised fundamental questions about the legality of the use of force in international relations. Critics argue that the operation is a violation of the UN Charter and sets a dangerous precedent for other nations to take unilateral military action. Supporters, on the other hand, argue that the threat of a nuclear-armed Iran was so imminent and severe that preemptive action was not only justified, but necessary. This debate has profound implications for the future of international law and the role of international institutions in maintaining global peace and security. The apparent inability of the UN Security Council to take meaningful action in response to the crisis has further highlighted the limitations of the current international system. This could lead to a further erosion of the rules-based international order and a return to a more power-based and unpredictable era of international relations. The consequences of this shift would be profound, increasing the risk of conflict and instability around the world. As we continue our reporting, we will also explore these legal and institutional themes, providing a more comprehensive understanding of the war's impact on the global order. Your support is crucial for this in-depth reporting. Please subscribe, like, and share our videos. Your engagement is what allows us to continue our mission. Thank you for your trust and your participation. The environmental consequences of the conflict are also a significant concern that has received relatively little attention. The military strikes on oil and gas facilities, the potential for oil spills in the Persian Gulf, and the overall destruction of infrastructure will have a profound and lasting impact on the region's environment. The Persian Gulf is a fragile ecosystem, already under significant stress from industrial activities and climate change. A major oil spill resulting from an attack on a tanker or a production facility could have devastating consequences for marine life and the livelihoods of millions of people who depend on the Gulf's resources. The destruction of industrial sites and the release of hazardous materials into the air and water will also pose a significant threat to public health. The long-term environmental damage will be a burden that the people of the region will have to bear for generations to come, long after the immediate conflict has ended. This is another tragic dimension of the war, a reminder of the far-reaching and often unforeseen consequences of military action. As we continue our coverage on WarCase, we will also explore these environmental themes, providing a more comprehensive understanding of the war's impact. Your support is crucial for this in-depth reporting. Please subscribe, like, and share our videos. Your engagement is what allows us to continue our mission. Thank you for your trust and your participation. The impact of the conflict on the global economy is not limited to the energy market. The disruption to global supply chains is causing widespread shortages of essential goods and services, affecting everything from electronics and automobiles to food and medicine. The shipping industry, which is the backbone of global trade, is facing a crisis of unprecedented proportions. With the Strait of Hormuz closed and other maritime routes under threat, shipping companies are forced to take longer and more expensive routes, leading to significant delays and increased costs. The insurance industry is also being hit hard, as the risk of maritime attacks has led to a dramatic increase in premiums. The global financial markets are in a state of turmoil, as investors grapple with the uncertainty and the potential for a prolonged global recession. The combination of high energy prices, supply chain disruptions, and financial instability is a perfect storm for the global economy, and the consequences will be felt for years to come. The world is facing a moment of profound economic crisis, and the US-Iran war is at the very center of it. The path to a peaceful resolution is shrouded in uncertainty, and the consequences of failure are too terrible to contemplate. As we continue our coverage of this world-shattering event, we want to remind you that your support is more important than ever. Please subscribe to WarCase, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments section below. Together, we can ensure that the truth about what is happening in the Middle East is told. Thank you for being part of the WarCase community. The humanitarian crisis unfolding in Iran and the wider Middle East is a tragedy of immense proportions. The loss of life, the physical and psychological scars, and the displacement of millions will reshape the social fabric of the region for generations to come. The cycle of violence and retribution, fueled by deep-seated grievances and a sense of injustice, will be difficult to break. As we reflect on the events of these past 17 days, it is imperative that we remember the human cost of war. Behind every headline, every strategic maneuver, and every political declaration, there are real people whose lives have been irrevocably altered. Their stories, their suffering, and their resilience must not be forgotten. The world has a moral obligation to address this humanitarian crisis, to protect innocent lives, and to work towards a lasting peace that addresses the root causes of this devastating conflict. This is not merely a geopolitical struggle. It is a profound human tragedy unfolding before our very eyes. We must not turn away. The geopolitical ramifications of Operation Epic Fury extend far beyond the immediate theater of conflict, threatening to redraw the global strategic map and usher in a new era of international relations. The involvement of the United States and Israel in a direct military confrontation with Iran has sent shockwaves through the international system, challenging existing alliances, exacerbating rivalries, and forcing nations to reevaluate their strategic postures. For the United States, the decision to launch a full-scale war against Iran represents a significant shift in its Middle East policy. After years of attempting to disengage from costly and protracted conflicts in the region, the Trump administration has now committed itself to a direct and potentially open-ended military intervention. This move has been met with a mixed reaction domestically, with some hailing it as a decisive act of strength and others condemning it as a dangerous and ill-advised escalation. Internationally, the U.S. has found itself largely isolated, with many traditional allies expressing deep reservations about the legality and wisdom of the operation. The unity of the Western alliance, already strained by previous geopolitical disagreements, has been further tested. For Israel, the war represents a culmination of its long-standing concerns about Iran's nuclear program and its regional influence. Prime Minister Netanyahu has consistently advocated for a hardline approach, and the current conflict is a direct result of that policy. While Israel has achieved its immediate objective of striking at Iran's nuclear facilities and leadership, it now faces the daunting prospect of a prolonged and potentially devastating conflict with Iran and its proxies. The intensification of the conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon, a direct consequence of Operation Epic Fury, highlights the immediate and severe risks that Israel now confronts. The regional powers, particularly Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, have found themselves in a precarious position. While they share Israel's and the US's concerns about Iran, they are also directly exposed to Iranian retaliation. The missile and drone attacks on their territories have underscored their vulnerability and forced them to reevaluate their security arrangements. Their long-standing reliance on U.S. security guarantees is now being tested, and they may be forced to seek alternative security partnerships or pursue their own independent defense strategies. Russia and China, both permanent members of the UN Security Council, have strongly condemned the U.S.-Israeli actions. For Russia, the conflict represents an opportunity to further assert its influence in the Middle East, positioning itself as a counterweight to U.S. power. Russia has long been a key ally of Iran, providing military and economic support, and it is likely to continue to do so, albeit cautiously, to avoid direct confrontation with the U.S. China, with its vast energy needs and growing economic ties to the Middle East, is deeply concerned about the disruption to global oil supplies and the potential for regional instability. While China is unlikely to intervene militarily, it will undoubtedly use its diplomatic and economic leverage to protect its interests and promote a peaceful resolution. The international institutions, particularly the United Nations, have been largely sidelined by the conflict. The Security Council, paralyzed by the veto power of its permanent members, has been unable to take any meaningful action to de-escalate the situation or enforce a ceasefire. This highlights the limitations of the current international system in addressing major geopolitical crises, particularly when powerful nations are directly involved. The long-term consequences of Operation Epic Fury are difficult to predict, but several scenarios are possible. One possibility is a prolonged and bloody regional war, drawing in more actors and leading to widespread destruction and instability. This could have devastating consequences for the global economy, triggering a deep recession and exacerbating existing humanitarian crises. Another possibility is a more limited conflict, with the US and Israel achieving their immediate objectives and Iran eventually capitulating. However, even in this scenario, the resentment and desire for revenge within Iran would likely fester, leading to a new cycle of proxy conflicts and covert operations. A third, and perhaps most dangerous possibility, is the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the Middle East. If Iran were to successfully develop nuclear weapons in response to the attacks, it could trigger a regional arms race with countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt seeking to acquire their own nuclear capabilities. This would create an even more unstable and dangerous environment, increasing the risk of nuclear conflict. The future of the Middle East, and indeed the world, hangs in the balance. The decisions made in the coming days and weeks will determine whether this conflict remains a regional tragedy or escalates into a global catastrophe. The need for diplomacy, de-escalation, and a renewed commitment to international law has never been more urgent. However, in the current climate of heightened tensions and deep mistrust, the path to peace remains elusive. The world watches, hoping for a resolution, but bracing for the profound and unpredictable consequences of this unprecedented conflict. We are committed to providing you with continuous, in-depth coverage of this unfolding crisis on WarCase. Your informed perspective is more crucial than ever in these challenging times. Please, if you found this comprehensive analysis valuable, consider supporting our work. Subscribe to our channel to ensure you receive all future updates and analyses as they happen. Hit the notification bell so you are always among the first to know when new content is released. Your likes on this video are a direct indicator to us that this in-depth reporting is appreciated and helps us to continue investing in the resources required to bring you such critical information. We also strongly encourage you to share your thoughts, questions, and perspectives in the comments section below. Your insights contribute to a richer, more diverse understanding of these complex events. And finally, please share this video across all your social media platforms. Spreading accurate and detailed information is a vital act in an age of misinformation. Help us ensure that as many people as possible are aware of the gravity and nuances of this conflict. Thank you for your continued trust and engagement with WarCase. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay safe. The world is watching, and WarCase will be there to document every moment. Thank you.